Hi, I'm Elise, and I'm with UC Davis. And UC Davis TERC has been one of the leaders in microplastics research in Lake Tahoe. And microplastics are any pieces of plastic that are smaller than 5 millimeters in size, which is about the size of a grain of rice. And plastics, when they are introduced into the environment, can break down in a variety of ways. They can be broken down by wind or sun exposure, even temperature changes or certain chemicals like salt can all break plastics into smaller and smaller pieces, but they never biodegrade or go away in the environment. So today we're going to conduct an experiment to investigate the different size of pieces of plastic that you might find in a beach sand sample from a nearby area. What you might need for this experiment will be a shovel and a bucket, and your sample will look something like this once you've collected it. You'll also need a ruler and some tweezers once you start sorting it out by size. And we've got these awesome tools that you can get your hands on at our Science Center when we reopen. There's sieves of different size mesh. So here we have a 25 millimeter mesh sieve, and then we have a 5 millimeter, and it gets down to a 2 millimeter mesh. And all of these are captured in our tray below. And I know probably most of us don't have this scientific equipment at home, so some things you might sub in would be a colander used for pasta, or some hand sieves like this with pretty small mesh, or a strainer that you could use to wash vegetables. Just be sure to ask your family before you use any of their important kitchen equipment in your science experiment. Let's get started. So scientists, when they're studying plastics, break them up into different size classes. And these size classes that we're using are macroplastics, mesoplastics, microplastics, and nanoplastics, and they get smaller as they go. The one that scientists focus on the most are microplastics, and those are any plastics that are smaller than 5 millimeters. And for size reference, I have a grain of rice and a microplastic right here, and you can see that those are pretty tiny. And microplastics are really dangerous because when they break down into those tiny pieces, animals might mistake them for food, and then they won't be able to consume enough actual food to keep them full. The first step is a visual assessment, and we do this to make the sieving process a lot easier by taking out anything that we know for sure is either not plastic or plastic. And some of these items over here are organic materials and other man-made materials that aren't plastic. Once you have sorted those out, you can go through with a set of tweezers or just with your hands and pick out the different pieces of plastic and measuring them to make sure you know which size class they belong to. So for example, this piece of plastic is greater than 2.5 centimeters, so that would be considered a macroplastic. But this piece of plastic is larger than 5 millimeters, but smaller than 2.5 centimeters, so this would be considered a mesoplastic. We've done our visual assessment and sorted out any obvious pieces of organic material or plastic. You can go through your plastics and sort them by size class using a ruler. But we're going to do that a lot quicker by using our different sieves. So we're going to start with our 2.5 centimeter sieve, which is going to sort out macroplastics. And in order to do that, we're going to reintroduce our plastic to our sample and use this base to catch everything that falls through. And then we're going to pour our sample through our sieve, being careful not to miss anything. Once you do that, you can give it a really good shake to let anything fall through. And anything that is on top of your sieve will be considered a macroplastic, and anything that falls through the base is something smaller. And so once you've done your macroplastics, we're going to move on to our next size class, which is mesoplastics. And just to repeat, mesoplastics are between 5 millimeters and 2.5 centimeters. So to do that, we are just going to pour our plastics through the sieve once again. And we only have one base with us right now, so it's going to be a little tricky. We're going to improvise and then shake through to catch anything, and I'm going to put the base back on so that way we can get really vigorous. Once you've done that, everything on top should be a mesoplastic. As you can see, we've missed some of our organic material, so we can go back through and collect those later. But now we've got our macroplastics, our mesoplastics, and then we're going to do one final sieve to catch our microplastics. So we said that microplastics are anything smaller than 5 millimeters. So anything that fell through this sieve should be considered a microplastic. And to catch those and to observe them a little clearer, we're going to use a 2 millimeter mesh sieve. So I am going to reintroduce those so we can use this base because that was a lot easier. And we'll pour our sand and tiny plastics through our final sieve. So as you can tell, they get harder and harder to see as you go because they're getting so small at this point. And some of the sneakier pieces are these styrofoam pieces that kind of look like little pebbles. And so you can see sometimes you might miss a piece of microplastic thinking that it's organic material. So these sieves are really useful in sorting those out. And underneath this final sieve, we have mostly sand, but also something called nanoplastics. And nanoplastics are so tiny that you would need a microscope to see them. You have sifted out all of these different pieces of plastic. You have it really easily laid out by macroplastics. Those are bigger than 2.5 centimeters. Mesoplastics, which are between 5 millimeters and 2.5 centimeters. And microplastics, which are smaller than 5 millimeters. And so we have microplastics and nanoplastics in these two. And as you can see, it gets tougher and tougher to differentiate the plastics from the sand as you go. So just imagine how difficult it would be to sort out all of these tiny pieces of plastic from an entire beach at Tahoe. It would be much easier if those plastics didn't end up on the beach in the first place. And there are a lot of things we can do to help prevent plastic pollution at Lake Tahoe. So come to our Science Center and check out our microplastics exhibit when we reopen and learn about the whole process from production of plastic all the way to disposal and the ways that it impacts our environment in between. Thanks.